In this video we're going to look at deduplication within the CRS. There's two ways records get deduplicated in the CRS. When you read records in from a file through the Import tab, they're automatically deduplicated as they're read into the system, and you have the option to review and to decide whether to bring records in that are flagged as duplicates or to discard them at that stage. The other way to deduplicate is to go through the Deduplication tab, which is what we're looking at here. And this is really for records that are already in the system that you want to scan over to see if any of them might be duplicates. The first thing you need to do is to decide on the strategy of deduplication that you want to employ. In the live version of the CRS, there's a default deduplication filter that's a pretty good starting point for most data sets, but it's worthwhile just exploring the options that you have with the deduplication filters and maybe playing around a little bit with your own data to see what settings work best for you and what settings find the most potential duplicates without finding too much noise. To create a deduplication filter, we go to the Deduplication Preferences box. We want to create a new filter, so we're going to say, let's call it Test Dedupe. Click OK. And then you'll see that what we have here is a list of all the fields that we can potentially use in the deduplication. We want to pick the fields that are going to give us the best chance of finding duplicates. So for references, a pretty good starting place is going to be the title. So we're going to say, let's take the title, but when we take the title, we have the option to do a fuzzy search on it, which we're not going to do here, but you could do that if you wanted to. We have the option to remove punctuation. Well, that's always a good thing to do with titles, so let's remove the punctuation before we do any comparisons. You have the option to restrict the first set of characters, and that's actually quite a good strategy if you want to try and pick up titles that are probably the same but may have extra bits at the end of the title. So let's give it a value of 35. Let's say we're going to take the first 35 characters of the title. And we're also going to say that we're going to remove brackets. And what remove brackets does is take anything that's at the end of the title string contained in brackets and strip it out for the purposes of comparison. And that often works well because sometimes titles have your own data at the end of it, or sometimes they have data that's been read in from the database that you're reading your records from. And that really shouldn't be used in the comparison of the title. The next thing that we might want to look at, I guess, would be the author. So let's take the author. We're not going to do a fuzzy search. We will remove punctuation. In this case, we're probably just going to look at a smaller set of characters. So let's just look at the first 4 characters of an author name. And what we're going to say is we're only interested in the author's surnames. We're not going to take their initials into account for comparison purposes between records. Another field that we might want to put in there would be year. So let's put the year in there. And again, we have the same options, but this time we have another one, which is to extract the year only. And what the extract year only does is to just take the year value from the field rather than the year and the month before it makes any comparisons. Okay, we could pick other fields too, and you might want to think about adding something like source. You might want to put all sorts of other values in there that you want to compare on. But for now, we're just going to leave it at that because that's an easy way to look at the different results we're going to get. So we click OK, and we have the option to deduplicate only marked records. So if you want to deduplicate just a subset of your data, you can do that. Or we can look at all records and deduplicate those. Well, this is a fairly small data set, so what we're going to do is to just go ahead and click on Process the Deduplication and run it across the whole 3,200 records. You can see from the progress bar that it works fairly quickly. It's finished now. It's gone through all of those records. It's found possible duplicates, 85. So if we can go in and look at those. What you see is this list of results here. And it's color coded so that the records that are next to each other with the same color are potential duplicates. So this record and this record are potentially duplicates of each other. And this record and this record are potentially duplicates of each other. And what you can see just by eyeballing this data is that with those settings where we've told it only to look at the first 35 characters of the title, we actually get quite a good stab at deduplication. We can see on this first one that this record and this record, if we just scroll across and look at the other fields, are quite likely to be the same record. So they're in the same journal, they've got the same authors, they've got the same year. So what we would probably want to do is to go and look at those records and just make sure that they are the same record. If we have a look at this one, this is quite clearly not a duplicate. So we didn't, if you recall, include the source in our deduplication algorithm. If we had, then it would have immediately detected that these were not the same record. This one probably is a duplicate record, and this one probably is a duplicate record, but with a misspelling in the title in one of the versions that we've got. So, once we've got these records, we've got several options as to what we do with them. If you want to go through and look at the records one by one, you can click both of the records and compare them. And you can compare them with the Merge Marked Records button. What that does is pop up the records side by side. And you'll see that this again is color-coded. When the colors are the same, so in this case it's yellow, the fields are identical. Where the colours are different, in this screen it's grey and white, then the fields are different in some way. Now that may be a fairly minor difference, it might just be a difference in punctuation, or it might be a major difference. In this case you can see that this record, which is the central record, and we know that because it tells us up here, it's got a C saying it's the central record. This record has an abstract, this record doesn't have an abstract. Scroll down a bit more, see if there's any other differences. Yeah, this record's got an embase accession number, and this one hasn't got an embase accession number. This one's got an issue, and this one doesn't have an issue. So clearly, this is the record that we're most likely to want to keep. If you're going to merge two records together, what often happens is that the source record, the one where you want to keep most of the data, contains the majority of the fields you want to keep, but this record over here might contain fields where you want to take some of the values. And you can do that within the merge screen for individual records just by ticking the ones that you want. So for example, if you want to, let's find a sensible field. If you wanted to take, if you thought that issue number was wrong, you thought there should be no issue number, you wanted to take the value from this record, then you just tick it, and it'll take that value above that value. There are some other options that you can look at for deduplication as well, and they're handled within the Merge Preferences screen. By default, we tell it to always use the field with the most text. That's quite useful if you have partial abstracts, for example, or if you have a field that contains some authors but not all authors. So having this ticked, then by default, the deduplication will take the field with the most information in it. You can say always use fields containing non-Latin characters. That's quite a useful one as well, because if you have authors where the authors don't match because one of them is spelt correctly with non-Latin characters and the other one has been converted to Latin characters, then you probably want to take the one with the correctly spelt author names. So it's quite a useful idea to have that ticked too. And the final one is to merge multiple field values. And what that does is to tell the merge algorithm to look at the individual values of multiple field values, compare them, and take all of the unique values from both fields. So we're going to apply that. And that now is a global setting that will apply to all the merges that we do. If we want to merge those records, we click Merge Records. It says merging these records will delete the non-selected record from the local database. Do you want to continue? The answer is yes. And we can see that we now have one record in here that's been merged. And if we wanted to, we could go through all of the other sets of records and do those one by one. And some of you will want to do that because sometimes it's not clear which fields should be merged into a single field. If you have the kind of data set where it is obvious, you can just click on Merge All Records, and what that will do will take all of the records that are ticked and merge them together using the default set of preferences. Once you're satisfied that that's what you want to do, you click the Complete Deduplication button, and that commits those changes, and that's the deduplication over.